Welcome to the American Dream in the Eyes of Immigrants podcast. I am your host, Heidy De La Cruz, and I am on the mission to change the narrative of immigration, one immigrant story at a time. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the American Dream in the Eyes of Immigrants podcast. I am your host, Heidy De La Cruz, and I have a very special guest with you. I have Mr. Joce with us, and he is going to be talking about his journey coming to the U.S., and you're going to teach us about crypto.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here today. So if you can introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and then we can get started on life back home.
Of course. My name is Joce, and everyone knows me as Finance Sensei, of course. These days, I get more Sensei than my actual name.
So tell us about what country you came from and what you remember since you came at 9.
From what I can remember, because, it's crazy because as you get older, you're like, wow, they all seem like distant blurs. But from what I remember, first and foremost, I was born in French Guiana and moved here at a very early age. But you have like little snippets of things. Like, for example, I have a weird memory of like being like playing under a truck. I don't know why I was there. I shouldn't have been, but it's little snippets of things that you remember. And then like you kind of talk with relatives. Honestly, not a lot. It was just so early. Like most of the memories I have is honestly just growing up here.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
okay.
That's the sad part.
So tell us, for those who don't know, where is French Guiana?
French Guiana, I get that all the time. It's not as so. Funny enough, when I first moved to the States, I felt like I had to be like a little geography teacher.
Yes.
South America, and then like right over here on top of Brazil is French Guiana. And I remember being in elementary school growing up, and I was like, you do the whole thing when you move, like, oh, like who you are, where you're from. And I told like the class, and this girl was like, oh, that's so cool. So you're Chinese? I'm like, no, it's in South America. But I just stuck with it. Like, yeah.
So
I can't part Chinese.
I mean, doing this podcast, I've learned of countries I had no idea about and like had to Google, like, for example, Malaysia. No, not Malaysia. What is it? See, now I don't even remember the name of it because she has her own podcast and then she says it's the only place where the doodoo bird actually lived. It's like in the south of Ireland. So now I got to look it up. And I was like, I've never heard of this country. So like Googled and I was like, okay, now I want to visit because it's like so beautiful. So so that's why I was like, okay, let people know where this is from.
Yeah.
But I've gotten that too. And being from the Dominican Republic, I remember telling this person like my family's from the Dominican Republic, and they're like, Cuba, and I'm like, yeah, Cuba. That's exactly where we're from. So moving from there to the U.S., what state do you guys move to?
Florida.
So directly here?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's Florida, honestly, is just, there's so many people from like the Caribbeans or South America that just, some people have eventually moved to like New York or further up, but, Florida was
usually it's like New York and then everywhere else.
Yeah, like Miami or just, just kind of settled into like the whole thing.
Did your family have family here? Is that where you guys land in Florida or?
I already had like my aunts and uncles who moved, like I have an uncle who moved here like since the 80s, like late 80s. So we already had like some like relatives that already living here. Yeah. But like, especially for like my mom's side of the family, they're scattered like all over the islands and some of them go back and forth.
Okay. And what cultural shock do you remember, like, first experience, besides the one in the classroom, like, her thinking that you were Chinese? What other cultural shock do you remember experiencing when you first got here?
Well, for me, what's a little bit interesting because as I remember earlier, something to correct on, from the islands, and I lived in France for a couple years.
Oh, okay.
It was very, like, one of those things where I kind of remember, like, going to, like, an English school. Okay. And, like, they, of course, you learn English in France. Over here, it's not as much of a requirement. But that was kind of, like, my first early memories of, actually what my surroundings looked like or how, like, being involved in the culture. Yeah. And over there in these schools, like, they would say like certain things about like, just to worry up your kids. Like, oh, I heard in America, or, like every dad has like a shotgun or something, or they have like burgers for breakfast.
Burgers for breakfast?
And as a kid, you're like, okay, I mean, that sounds legit. I don't know any better. So when I moved to, the States and you start going to schools and, you have different conversations, you're like, oh, that's so cool. Like over there, do you guys have snails for breakfast?
Oh,
You're like, what? What are you talking about? It's like, yeah, I heard that's what they do over there. I'm like, no, it's kind of like here, but somewhere else.
Yeah.
And you just hear like these little things and nuances. Another one that was for me a little bit different. Like you Caribbeans or even like, French people, like we're very touchy.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
Hi, how you doing?
Mm-hmm. A hug, kiss on the cheek.
Kissing. And over here, when like, it's just like, ew, what are you doing? Yeah. I'm like, no, I'm just trying to say hi. So that was kind of like my intro to, oh, wow, like things could be severely different just based on how you grew up. Like things that are so common and normal to you is like another culture, like, what are you doing? Why is this guy trying to kiss me?
So you speak French and English?
I don't know if I could claim that because I have friends of mine who were like, a lot of my friends who grew up like were Spanish, and they're like, I have a good amount of Spanglish.
Okay.
So I feel
yes.
French. Like I can't understand enough to guide you and have a conversation, but like I lost a lot of my Frenchy card.
So when you speak with your family, like mostly English?
It would mostly, I would say, between English and like Haitian Creole. So like my mom's side.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So like we predominantly grew up like, just speaking like Haitian Creole. So I pretty much like that I've had practice in, but with French, it's not as something like, we usually have especially living in America, like you have English or Spanish.
Okay.
The French population is, to what I've seen at least, not that high.
Yeah. So you were mixed.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So you said your mom's side of the family is Haitian? Mm-hmm. And then so your dad is?
He's from French Guiana.
Interesting. Okay, cool. And so tell us about, growing up here. Did you live in like a diverse neighborhood, or like how was that for you?
Oh man, I grew up with my Cuban brothers.
Oh, nice.
So especially living in Miami, it has like a really high like Spanish and like Asian culture. So like one of my good friends, pretty much like considered like, his mom was like my mom, my Spanish mom. Mm-hmm. But like I grew up I think first couple of years of my life was, spent in Miami, and then we moved to, Central Florida and went back and forth for a while, but pretty much between those two. And even then, in living in Florida, like you have these nuances where the things that you say like in Florida, I mean, in like Miami, you come back to Orlando, you're like, wait, we don't even talk like that. Like it's so crazy. You're in the same state, but there's so many things that are like drastically different. Yeah. Like when I first moved to Orlando, like we went to schools, they were like, oh, like jit was a common thing. Like, oh, look at this jit. And we're like, what? Like, what's that like, bro? Like that's over there. So that was really interesting.
So what does that mean?
It's like, how do I describe that? Yo, jit. Like it's just, I don't even. It's weird. Like you now it's like use it in the sentence. Jit. Like it's just the way that they speak is completely different. There's some people in Miami when they talk, I'm like, bro, are you speaking English?
Like I can't understand your. So that's why it's so interesting. Even within the United States, where immigrants land, also really shapes their experience. Right? Like if they land in New York, or like you said, South Florida, California, like it really, really, shapes their experience. So that's why I like to get into this. Like, okay. And once they're within the United States, like we tend to move. Like, so for example, my parents immigrated from Dominican Republic to New York, but we ended up going to Grand Rapids, Michigan. And then like now we're all in Central Florida. So it's like once immigrants move, they're like more tend to move, again. So it's interesting that you guys went to France and then here, and so like now you're here. So you haven't lived in any other states or?
No, I've visited, but yeah, we visited and we love traveling. But Florida has been home for the most part. And honestly, the more we travel, like some of these states are desert hot, some of them are way too cold. So Florida has been on. I'm glad that this is where we landed. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that you had family in like, Michigan. Or did you notice like a difference of how they kind of interact or cultures even living in those different states with your family?
So they tend to keep their culture. So it was like they, you'll adapt here and there, but like I had this guest tell me once, she was like, once you went to my house, you're no longer in the United States. Like you are in Nigeria. And I felt like that was the same thing with my family. Like once you step foot into my house, like you are in the Dominican, like, we try to keep the food, the music. I remember my parents like getting the Latino channel packages and the cable so they could like watch the Dominican Republic channel and like stay up to date with the news and everything. And so like, so it was just like, no, speak Spanish at home. No English. So that's why I'm like trying to do the same thing with my daughter. Cause like I can speak both. Sometimes I do forget language or words in both languages, whether Spanish or in English. So I'm trying to do the same thing with my daughter. But yeah, they really keep their culture. Like my family really kept the culture. And growing up there, now I feel like there's more Dominicans in Grand Rapids than what it was when I was growing up. So it's like, like if you have friends and family that live there, like they tend to like, oh, well, check it out here. But like, that's what happened to my dad. He was in New York and he had a friend who was in Grand Rapids and they had a lot of factory jobs back in the 90s. So my dad went through a traumatic event in New York. And so his friend was like, oh, come to Grand Rapids. There's lots of jobs here. So that's how we ended up there. So.
Yeah, that's amazing to hear that you actually try to incorporate those things at home.
Yeah.
There's so many kids that either have either Spanish parents or French, whatever, and they have no idea how to speak the language or know anything about the background period.
Yeah.
And those are the things that, kind of makes all of us unique.
And it's like the further remove your generation, it's like you lose a little bit more of the culture. You like assimilate more to the American culture. But again, the United States is such a melting pot that it's like, what is American culture, So did you get to visit French Guiana after moving to the U.S.?
No, I actually haven't had a chance to go back. No, it's most of my family, I've actually already immigrated to France, and I have like distant relatives that I haven't really, which I still do want to. It's a very good question because right now in this season of my life, I'm trying my best to just reconnect with my roots along the way. Especially with, how I grew up. When I moved here, I was raised by like aunties and uncles. And for a period of time, I always felt very disconnected from like my roots. And same concept. I was like, well, now I'm like, well, who are you? Like, who is Jocelyn Mazador, And when we had these conversations even earlier, it touched a string with me when you were like, well, you're trying to teach like your daughter, like the language barrier. And for like, even for me and my wife, she's from like Middle Eastern descent. Her father is, Pakistani, her mom's Indian. And there's so much culture that we have just within like our household. But we don't want like,
she's mixed your mix.
Exactly. Yeah. And to have conversations like we try to like embark like even our culture, but we don't even know anything about our culture. So one of the goals that I have like within the next, 5 years is to, visit French Guiana, go back to Haiti and just overall just try to indulge myself like in like my roots.
Awesome. Oh my goodness. That is a lot of cultures. But that's awesome though. It's also rich, like you said, your household is rich in culture. I wanted to ask, pronounce your name again.
Jocelyn.
Okay. Because you pronounce it in French.
Sweet. Yes.
You would just, okay. So, because I know we had a conversation before we started recording, and even before that, like, because you said, like, oh, people, the way it's spelled.
Right.
People think it's
so when
Jocelyn.
I first came here, the first thing I heard was, oh, Jocelyn. Like, it's like, who's Jocelyn? Jocelyn. And as I got older, I would have conversations with mom, and I was like, hey, like, did you give me a girl name? Because her name is Jocelyn.
No.
So I was like, were you just trying to be cute? And then you giving me a girl name? She's like, no, like and France, like that is traditionally like a boy's name. And it's one of those things where same concept, depending where you live, it has an entirely drastic, like nuance to it. But when I moved here, first thing I heard was Jocelyn. I had a girl in my class named Jocelyn.
Oh,
so it was like, and it didn't help. Like I had longer hair, like long hair back then, I was like, okay. So that was very confusing for me. And what made it worse, especially having that language barrier, and I'm still learning like how to explain things to people. And I have a very vivid memory of this was like one of like she was a sweetheart. It was Miss McPherson. I remember her. And she was out. We had a substitute teacher that took over.
Okay.
So they were doing all these little activities, and they were, again, this substitute teacher doesn't know who we are, personalities, or anything like that. She's just doing her best. She's doing activities with the boys versus the girls, and she's separating all of them. Like, like, hey, David.
Yeah.
And then she got to my name. She's like, Jocelyn. Okay, cool. Go with the girls. I'm like, no, like, wait, my name is Jocelyn, and I'm actually a boy. And she goes down, she like gets on her knees and she's like, "Oh, sweetie, you can be whatever you want, but go with the girls."
What?
And I was just like, "Oh, what?"
I love her being supportive. What?
And like I went home and I was like, "No, like it's not my name. You see what happens." Like I ended up telling my mom to cut my hair. I had like short hair up until my really late 20s.
Oh my God.
But it's little things like that. That's like, it just kind of sticks with you.
Yeah.
You don't realize.
So your name is French. And so so you said you looked up that it was actually a company.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, because I did not believe her. I'm like, no, and because I was so young too when I was, I didn't pay attention to stuff like that until I got here. I got exposed because no one really raised concern when they were there. It was oh, it's so slang. It was it was normal, which at the time I didn't realize until I got exposed to the American culture.
Yeah.
So I started looking the name up and I was like, oh, okay, fine. I guess you were really nice.
Well, I'm glad you didn't change your name because a lot of immigrants do end up changing their names to assimilate or quote unquote, assimilate to the American culture or like, oh, just call me this, or like shorten it up or whatever. But people do call you Joce for sure. Or the Finance
Sensei.
Finance Sensei.
That has stuck and now I have it on my arm. I guess it's
you got a tattoo?
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so tell us about that.
So the Finance Sensei is very interesting. It initially was just supposed to be my company name.
Okay.
Growing up, and because as I mentioned, when we first moved here, we moved to Miami, and one of the few things that I noticed very early on was, when you're paying attention to what you're surrounded with becomes pretty much your reality. And for a while, when I was living with my aunt and uncle, it was like I just saw like, yo. Don't get me wrong, like we had a house, we had the lights on, but it was very like hard. Sometimes it was like we struggled financially.
Okay.
And it got to a point where I lived with another one of my aunts who lived in Boynton Beach. And that literally the corner where we lived at, it was so weird. You had this one section where you could clearly tell it was a certain tax bracket. And the other part where you're like, wow, these people have money. So as a kid, you start paying attention to little things like that. Like you're not really worried about financials, but you do notice like, oh, the other kids like they have a nicer backpack. Oh, okay, like they have these, like they can afford the field trip without any struggle. The school I went to was way more on the affluent side because I was right on the border and the way they did I don't know why they do school zones like this, but whatever. So I ended up going to the affluent school side, but my family
we know why they do it, but that's a whole different story.
And during that time period, so you're being around these kids, you're like, wow, like they live completely different than the way I do. So then you start asking questions like, okay, well, what do their parents do? Like, what's the main difference? And one of the kids that I went to school with, Mark, we get really close, and I started spending more and more time around his house. And there was little things that I was noticing where with my family, we never had conversations about, money, or it was almost like a hush kind of conversation. Like you don't bring money to the table. Money is the root of all evil. That kind of conversation. You go to school, you get a job, and you eventually get a career and you go into that. And where in Mark's family, the conversation out here between like, their parents and like their parents, I'm like, that is drastically different. And then the way that they live is drastically different. And as I start getting more and more curious, and I started asking the dad or the mom, like, what do you do? What are different conversations? What do you think about that? And I bring it back and they're like, well, we don't talk about stuff like that. Like, that's not how we live our life. And as I got older, I started to understand that it wasn't anything like my aunts or uncles telling me to, go to college and go do this. Like to them, that was their American dream. Like you move here, you get a good job, you get a good degree and then you end up in a career that you can support yourself. That's the advice stability. That's the advice that essentially was the best thing that they could provide you because they didn't have those opportunities. So they want you to go and do that. But, as much as the good intention was there's certain things where you're going to have to carve your own path. Yeah. So when I started asking him those questions, he's like, well, that's not necessarily bad advice, but you got to think about, do you want to be the employee or do you want to be the one that provide the jobs? And I was like, I'm like, bro, I'm still a kid. Like, there's some deep things to say. Yeah. And it was very interesting because around that time, you have these little reading assignments that you would have in classes. And we started reading a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So when I started reading that book, I was like, this is so crazy because I feel like, and again, this is not to call I love my uncle, like, we drink bar all the time. Let me put your bald head. He always had this thing where the advice that he would give him, like, it's very similar to the Arthur's, like that, like his way of thinking, like his mindset. And then Mark's dad, I'm like, oh, like, it's kind of like, the rich dad. The advice that they give, it all comes from good intentions, but it's drastically different in the way that they think. And it always kind of stuck with me. It was like, well, okay, which one do you want to be? The employee or the one who provides the jobs?
That is a really good question, even now to ask.
Yeah.
For those who are like starting businesses and things like that, it's like, like you said, do you want to be the employee or you want to be the one who provides the job? And you read this book in school?
We started it in school. Most of us, I'm not gonna lie, but it's probably most people don't know what Spark Notes is, but they just went online and got like the short version. But for me, because at the time period, there were so many things that resonated with the way I was living. I'm like, I want to actually find this book and read it.
No, I just want to be, because like, I didn't read that book until I was almost 30.
Really?
Yeah, because like in school, they don't teach you financial literacy.
Yeah.
At all. And so it wasn't until like I was almost 30, I was like, okay, I need to get my finances together.
Yeah.
Because I was just like working, paying bills, and that's it. And it's like, there's more. There has to be more. So then that's literally the first book I read when I started to get interested in financial literacy.
I'm honestly not surprised because even reading that book, it wasn't at the school curriculum or anything like that. So the teacher that we had there, she was very much about, okay, like instilling these things early. Like she was very hands-on. Yeah. She was dope. There's so many things that she went out of her way like to teach us because she just wanted to build those kind of like knowledges and stuff like that early. I know for sure that wasn't school curriculum because even later on when I was like in high school taking economics class, I'm like, what? This is not what I thought it would be. Like the same thing. And which is where it's a bit sad because you go through a lot of us in even like friends that we graduate, high school or even college at one point, we're like, well, we don't know how to do taxes. We don't know anything about credit. We don't really understand anything about how to support ourselves as adults.
Yep.
I remember having my first job and filling out the application. I was like, hey, like when it comes to this tax portion, it's like put a 2-1, like,
what do you do?
What does this mean? And he's like, oh, I can't help you with that legally. I'm like, okay, but like not as my boss. Like, what does this mean? He's like, I have no idea. Just do one and then you'll figure it out later. Cool. Got it. What happens if I do this wrong? Oh, you could be fined or go to jail. No pressure. Got it.
At all.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So touching back into the whole how Finance Sensei came to be, that was always in the back of my mind. Like so I started, like as a regular 16, 15-year-old, like you get your first retail job and going through the process. And I always had this like thing, I'm like, okay, this is for now, but what do I want to do? Yeah. And I want to learn more about like what Mark said. I want to learn, he started telling me about like investing, all of these things. And I wanted to touch base on it. And it was at the time where I lived in Miami, like not a lot of people were around me at least had those conversations. So I always felt like the oddball, like why aren't we looking into this investing stuff? Why aren't we really looking into like, real estate, this and that? And it was always this, oh no, like that's not for us. Like we don't go to do these things. Like we don't try like to aspire to do these things. And I'm just like, why though? Like why do we have this limiting belief that this is the only thing we have to do is make sure we have to get a good job to be stable? Like it's this limiting thing that like we can't step outside of like that circle. So I'm like, no, I want to learn more about it. And that always kind of carried with me up until even my younger adulthood, or when I started getting more other jobs and started educating myself. So I started practicing with, how to buy stocks or looking into how to buy like, Forex and all of these different investment fields. And which kind of led into how I fell into crypto. But long story short, I always had like this yearning for like, I want to learn more about what is it like about the financial system? Because as much as I know, like, our people move here and they work their butts off and they grind it out, most of them ends up just making bare minimum. Yeah. And that's, to me, it's like, well, what kind of dream is that? Yeah. You struggle, essentially you work your hardest and even down the line. And COVID even cemented that because a lot of these people had minimum wage job that once that job was gone, there was nothing left to support them.
Unfortunately. Yeah. And so how did your family take it that you took this route?
I believe I now, I'm seeing it now more and more that they've seen it's funny. I saw a post on Instagram the other day, and it was like a stadium, right?
Mhm.
And it said it basically had like the empty stadium. It was like, well, who's here for the working process, the hustle, or just the behind the scenes? And I'm explaining this horribly, but it was very like, touching. The second slide was, a stadium full of people clapping and cheering. It's like, who's here for the congratulations? And
Wow.
that was just like okay, like, and again, I don't think my family had any ill intention of they just didn't understand.
It's just that they didn't know. Yeah. So it's like, but now that you
It's
win
like,
it and you see, it's like, okay.
It's like, okay, all right. And not everyone, and that's okay too. Like the thing is, sometimes we have to learn, like, it's okay for them not to understand. Your journey is different.
Yes.
Whether it's family, friends, or anyone in general, like not everyone will always understand.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
But what's so hard also is like immigrants, we are so family oriented and we let their opinions, their fears, and like project onto us. So it's like they can we can question ourselves, like, is this right? Like, is not, but it's like you have, like you said, you have to believe in your dream. Like you have to believe in your vision and your idea because they don't understand, which is okay. But it's like, you have to like break through that to be able to like, because the other thing is like, I'm doing this podcast and I've been doing this podcast for 3 years now, but like when I was in high school, I mean, yeah, there was podcasts because podcasting started in 2004, but like you didn't hear like that could be a career. Right. Or that's something that you could do. So it's just like, so it's just like, that's not something that my parents would know about because it wasn't a thing.
It's like, so what do you do?
Yeah. So it's like, and like my family will ask me like, oh, how's the podcast going? Like, are you making a ton of money? And it's like, you guys, come on. But no, I'm glad that you were able to path your own way. And then now you teach others about crypto. Okay.
For sure. And so leading into that, the question about the family, most for a very, not even friends and family, a lot of people just in general, especially being cryptocurrency being a newer thing, would just get understand it, like, period. And for a while, even before I decided to, dive into this thing, like I had to be sure, like, okay, is this the path that you want to take?
Yeah.
Because when I first started, it was just out of curiosity. And then I fell in love with the whole concept, and it was like a side hustle, a side gig for me.
I was going to ask that, like, when you shifted to full-time, but keep going.
Yeah. So it was, for a period of time, it was just like a side thing. And when I was becoming more and more in that, and like I started, being like, there was a point where I had to compare, like, this is how much I'm making with this, like working a full-time job. And this is how much we're making essentially doing this on the side.
Yeah.
And, not that I recommend doing it, but it was a work from home job. And I'm like, okay, cool, have my time and my laptop's over here and I'm doing it. And COVID, I feel like it was a catalyst for a lot of people in different ways. Because one of that job that I worked at, we were kind of furloughed for a little bit, then we were not furloughed. That's what we were trying to figure out. But during that process, there were people that, I knew that worked for that company. There was one lady in particular who was like 31 years deep, close to retirement, and they let her go and she lost her benefits. And throughout that whole thing, because my team deal with like most of the customers, they kept us, but it was like no one at the end of the day. Sometimes I try to tell people, I'm like, okay, they ask me questions about like, oh, what do you think I should, like, even my cousin the other day had a question about like something with HR. I'm like, HR, you have to understand, is here to protect the company. Of course, it's human resources, but they're employees of the company. So their job is essentially mitigate the risk as much as possible for the company. The company is there for themselves. Now, it doesn't sound like, well, every company has to make money, obviously. Like, that doesn't make them inherently evil. But when it comes down to it, they will let you go to save whatever they need to save. And a lot of people learned that the hard way. Like, they lost their jobs, lost their benefits. And even though at the time I was kind of in and out of being furloughed, I was still kind of going through this whole thing. I'm like, all right, like, this is mine. Like, this, no one can take this away from me. I can still continue to do it, whether with a job or without a job. But no, a whole lot of people could say that. And we were at the point where we were buying like our first house at that point. And, I'm talking to my wife about it, and she's always been so supportive, which, sometimes I was like, man, you're way more supportive than I even expected.
Aww.
So she was just like, you know what? this is probably just a sign. It's time for you to really just believe in yourself and just step into it and do it. And I'm just like, what do you mean? Doing it full time?
She gave you that push.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she's like, the minute we close down this house, like, you're leaving this job, because at the end of the day, you're just waiting a will they, won't they let me go situation. And this is something that you could do and you're good at and like you're passionate about it. But although like I knew I could do it, but like you just mentioned, you hear that voice and like your relatives like, oh, what do you do? Is this the stuff with the internet money? Is this a very real job? Like, I did the work. I went to college, and throughout the whole time, both me and my wife, we both went to different colleges. And one day we were having a conversation. We're like, hey, we were still very early on stage of like figuring out, like, she was figuring out her business and I was really diving into this crypto stuff. And we're like, why are we going to college? Well, we'll have it. And
so you're supposed to do.
Yeah, it's supposed to do. And then we stopped there. We were in the car for almost like an hour. We had conversations and we paused and we both kind of went to the realization like, hey, are we following our path or are we following the path that we're expected to follow? And both of us we knew the answer to that. We didn't say anything, but we knew the answer. And when it led to her telling me to like, leave that, I'm like, oh, I've already let them down by like not following that path. I'm kind of if I leave this stable job, that my career, it's just another thing they're going to look at and be like, oh, like we now understand. And she kind of forced me to reevaluate like, hey, like, are you following your path?
Yeah.
So I went for it, but throughout the entire time when, we'd have conversations with family members, it's just there is the ones that are trying to be supportive, but also like, you're going to do what?
Play with internet money.
So what is, and even a couple years after, they were like, oh, do you still work this job? I'm like, no, I left that job years ago. So what do you do now? Oh, I'm a full-time system. Oh, I'm an investor. So is this like a TikTok thing? Like, no. Yeah, which it's so crazy because sometimes I feel like, of course, there's always going to be the generational gap of like understanding information, but there's also the culture gap as well, right? Because there's not where the time that they lived and also where they're from, it's not something that's like common where you'd be like, well, I have a full online business. There's people that I know that has an online business, online workshops or whatever, online retail stores, and that's still like, I don't understand it. Like, what is that? And that's okay. I love you anyways. But we're all following our own paths.
Yes, 100%. And not to like downplay education, because like if those who do have degrees and that's what they wanted to do, that's their dream. Like for example, me, like I have master's degree and everything. But it's like, that's not for everybody.
I'm not letting someone operate on me without a degree. Like,
exactly.
No. There's one.
So it's like, but it's a path for everyone. But college is not for everyone. Like there's a lot of people who do have the entrepreneur spirit, and you do need both. You do need the entrepreneurs to create the jobs, and then you also need employees who are, who don't have the entrepreneur spirit to be able to work the job. So like we need both in society, but
1,000%.
But if college is not for you, that's okay. Even if that's what your family wants you to do, And I've realized doing this podcast that a lot of immigrant families do have that dream for their kids. It's like the same dream as like, okay, we came to this country for you, to sacrifice for you to go to college, get the stable job, the benefits and everything. But the great thing about here is that like you can carve your own path and your own way. And yes, there are challenges that are going to come up. There are things set in place to like hold us back, but you can't let that hold you back. You gotta, if you really, really believe in your dreams, you're gonna go for it. And so,
I would say as someone who is so deeply passionate about education, like I can tell I was a nightmare for my aunt because I'm so curious about everything. There was one time where I took this was before we had these fancy flat screen computers. I'm talking about the one with the big butts, like the white ones. And, I'm playing around with it. And I figured out when you press different things, like the BIOS screen shows up and you could go and like tinker with it. So then I'm more curious and I started messing with it more and more. And then eventually I broke it. So I was like, let me take it apart and see what this does and what that does. And I know I was just a nightmare for her. But at the same time, I've always just have like this curiosity of like, I want to know how that works. So with education, like I strongly believe it's something that is fundamentally important in society in general. I mean, we're at a point now where, don't quote me on it, but I think it's something I saw recently where the average American is like at it's not even a middle school. I think like a
Reading
fifth
level?
grade reading level or something like that.
So I was a freelance writer for a little bit, and they tell you that. They tell you to dumb it down pretty much.
Yeah.
Like you have to make sure that it's at a sixth grade or lower, fifth or sixth grade reading level so people can understand, which is unfortunate.
We're in the most technologically advanced time, anytime within our history, but we have in a modern, even like a first world country, like why is our education or reading level so low? So I feel
we know why, but that's a story.
Yeah, I feel like we have to do a separate topic. Yeah. But 1000% education. I'm a huge, despite the fact that a lot of things I might say or conversation I have, it might seem like I'm anti-education, anti-college. Absolutely not. I just believe that it's not. We can't just expect okay, here you go. Here's just the factory. You go through this version, you go that, and then you just pushed out. There's so many individuality, there's so many interests. And I feel like our current education system doesn't allow us to, develop those individual skills or those talents where it does make sense, because for even my uncle who has a degree and goes through these things, I'm like, bro, you have a communication degree and are you working at anything that has to do with communication? No, but it just felt like, oh, well, and he was honest with me. He's like, I was looking at all the options and I just chose one.
Yeah. Legit.
That's even for me when I was going through, what as degree I should follow. I was going through it. I'm like, okay, none of this makes sense. I guess I have an interest in business, so I'll do business management.
Yeah.
And then I had a conversation with a friend of mine one time. He started with a company. And he's like, oh, what was your degree? He's like, business management. He's like, oh, so you didn't know what you want to do. And I was like, whoa. But it's sad, but some of us dedicate so much time and energy to essentially just fill their degrees. And
I will say college helped me with research.
Oh, that is true.
Because again, I got my bachelor's in psychology and healthcare administration because I was already in the medical field. And then when I did my master's, it was healthcare administration. But you have to write a lot of papers and then you have to research. And they're very, very picky on your sources. So that helped me with research and then also diving into what is a credible source, what is not, which I find is so important nowadays because people take whatever's on the internet and just run. Yes, and just run with it. And it's like, people, no, I was literally talking to this person about this probably is not going to end up in the episode, but with the whole LA riots or protests, actually. They were calling them riots. And then so people were posting pictures from 2020 and making it seem like it was happening now. And so I remember somebody posted it and I was like, okay, where's the source from this? When is this picture taken? I was literally asking all the questions. And somebody commented and was like, why does that matter? I was like, what do you mean? Why does that matter? Because people are taking something from another time and trying to make it seem like it's today. So it's very relevant. And then the person responded well, this picture's going viral. And I'm like, just because a picture's going viral does not make it true. Are you serious right now? So yes, college definitely helped me with that. But
that's a really good point. It sounds there's sometimes where I'll scroll down and are you familiar with The Onion?
The Onion?
Yeah. They basically for the past couple years, for example, one thing that they posted I think 4 years ago was they do these little news articles or even stories. I don't know how they do it to record it. It was a mega church in Texas launched a nuclear rocket. So you see it and it looks like an actual news story, but their whole page is satire. Their whole thing is just they launch these crazy news stories and you're like, oh, that's pretty funny. A mega church having a missile. Okay, cool. And most of their stories are just very crazy, out of pocket things. And recently, or I'm just even saying past couple of years, there's been so many things that are happening and people were like, hey, was this an Onion post? Or no, this actually happened.
Oh my God.
You'll see these comments now. So I don't know if you ever come across it. People are like, oh, this seems like an Onion post. It's no.
No, it's legit, yeah.
The company themselves, there was one time there was a post that happened. They were like, guys, we're getting to a point now where we're even having competition. Because there's so many interesting things.
Actually, it did happen with a recent one of the recent Supreme Court rulings, a friend who works in immigration, she posted it, and somebody posted under, it was like, this is fake news. And so I had to comment. I was like, unfortunately, it's not. Like, the ruling literally just came in. Like, this is happening. So yeah. So not that it was an onion post, but it was it was just something that like she could not believe and thought of. It's like, no, they actually ruled on that. But how can people connect with you, work with you, with your crypto business?
Through primarily right now I'm getting my website up.
Well, by the time this airs, it'll pop.
Yeah, so my website as well as I have a great social media manager. Work together because again, a lot of us get into business and we're not social media people. And we have to learn that I'm great at what I do.
Yeah,
what you do. But through Instagram at the Finance Sensei or Finance Sensei. And even email me like, hey, at thefinanceSensei.com.
Perfect. I'll include your links in the show description. And the last question that I'd like to ask to wrap up this amazing conversation is, what does the American dream mean to you?
I saw it when you sent me that, and I thought about it for a while. And a lot of times where we hear certain things, like we have the answer and then we try to complicate the answer by like, oh, maybe it's not, maybe it's this. And I just went back, what was the first thing that came to your mind? And the first thing was opportunity. Despite, all the crazy things that might be going on here, like not even in the US and over the world, America for the longest time has been opportunity for a lot of people, even back in the day where you have these immigrants, escaping World War II, or, like the Statue of Liberty has always been like a symbol of like the chance to start over. And make no mistake, this country offers opportunity and offers chances for people wherever you're from to essentially make something out of yourself. And for me, that was no different. Even your culture, where you're from, and all these different things that there are things that makes us different, but also unite us. And we're all searching for that chance to make our lives and everyone's lives better, and even now we live in these crazy moments, but we all at the end of the day want the same thing. We want to be happy. We want to be safe. We want to be financially secure where we're not stressing. And we definitely don't want, to have to struggle or whatever the case is. And that's all comes from opportunity. That's what the American dream means to me is because I was able to live that dream. I started creating my own way, creating my own opportunity.
Here you go. Now you're living your own American dream.
Yeah.
Love that. Thank you so much for your time, for sharing. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm so honored. Like I love your podcast. Aww. So it's just being able to share that, especially right now with all the things that you hear about immigration. And I've always been really admirable to your work that you do in spreading, just, informing everyone about everything.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to Mommy Podcast.